The silence doesn't fall immediately, it spreads. It starts at the center of the table and crawls outward, swallowing the clink of glasses, the background music, even the hum of the restaurant itself. Ethan doesn't move. His voice hadn't risen, hadn't trembled, and that's what makes it lethal. His words hang in the air like something sharp and metallic, impossible to ignore. Lauren's smirk collapses mid-breath, her confidence cracking for the first time that night. Ryan's posture stiffens, his shoulders square instinctively, but there's nowhere for his dominance to go. Eyes shift. No one laughs now. No one rescues the moment. Ethan feels it, the first time in his life that the comparison has stopped working against him. He hasn't won applause. He's won control. And in that frozen second, he realizes something unsettling. Lauren wasn't testing a joke. She was revealing a truth she assumed he was too small to challenge. Inside Ethan, something finally goes quiet, but not in a fragile way. The old noise fades. Childhood dinners where Ryan spoke louder, stood taller, was chosen first. The birthdays where Ethan watched from aside. The subtle lessons that taught him to accept less and smile while doing it. All of that rushes through him in a flash and then settles into something colder, heavier, and far more dangerous: clarity. He realizes this humiliation wasn't accidental or new. It's been woven into their relationship, disguised as humor, confidence, love. Lauren didn't expect resistance because she's never needed to fear it. Ethan understands now. Tonight wasn't about celebrating an engagement. It was about establishing dominance for life. And for the first time, he feels the strange relief of seeing the truth clearly, even though it burns. The man he was 5 minutes ago would have apologized. This man doesn't feel the urge. Ethan doesn't feel triumphant. What he feels is irreversible awareness. The kind that splits a life into before and after. He looks at Lauren now and sees not his future wife, but a woman who mistook his patience for weakness and his silence for permission. Her fingers tighten around her glass, knuckles whitening just slightly, an unconscious tell that she's lost control of the narrative. Ryan avoids Ethan's eyes, suddenly unsure of his place in the hierarchy he's always owned. And that's when it lands fully. This wasn't a single cruel comment. It was a glimpse behind the curtain. A truth that slipped out because Lauren believed Ethan would swallow it like he always had. But he didn't. And because of that, everything has changed. The engagement dinner continues, awkwardly stitched back together, but Ethan knows the story has already broken. The man who walked in believing this was the happiest night of his life will never walk out the same. Growing up, Ethan learned early that comparison was the language spoken in his house. Ryan didn't need to demand attention. It naturally bent toward him. Coaches praised Ryan's strength. Teachers admired his confidence. Relatives ruffled his hair like he was already something special. Ethan stood beside him, smaller in presence but sharper in perception, watching how easily the world rewarded loud certainty. He adapted the only way he could, by becoming observant, emotionally tuned, and careful with his words. While Ryan took risks without consequence, Ethan learned restraint. Ryan wasn't cruel. He simply moved through life unaware of the space he occupied, unaware of who he overshadowed. Every family gathering reinforced the hierarchy: Ryan first, Ethan second. Over time, Ethan internalized the idea that love was conditional, earned through patience and compliance. He didn't resent Ryan. He resented himself for always feeling like the quieter option, the backup choice in every room he entered. Lauren entered Ethan's life like a spotlight he wasn't used to standing in. She was confident in a way that commanded rooms, quick-witted, stylish, admired. When she chose him, truly chose him, it felt like a reversal of everything Ethan believed about himself. For the first time, he wasn't second. He wasn't overlooked. He was wanted. That feeling blinded him to the early warning signs, the jokes that landed just a little too sharp, the casual comparisons to exes framed as stories, the way she corrected him publicly while smiling. Lauren thrived on validation, on being seen as desirable and impressive, and Ethan mistook that hunger for passion. He told himself her humor was just confidence, her critiques honesty. Each small humiliation slid by unchallenged, absorbed in the name of love. Ethan believed patience was maturity, endurance was devotion. He didn't realize he was slowly shrinking himself to fit the version of him she found most manageable. By the time Ethan recognized the cracks, the foundation was already heavy with weight. The wedding was planned, deposits paid, invitations discussed. Families were intertwined, expectations cemented. Financially and emotionally, Ethan was invested in a future that felt too large to dismantle without consequence. Speaking up now wouldn't just risk an argument, It threatened to unravel everything he'd worked to build. And yet, staying silent carried its own cost. Each swallowed discomfort chipped away at his sense of self, teaching him that love required erasure. Ethan stood at a quiet crossroads no one else could see. If he confronted Lauren, he risked losing the life he'd committed to. If he stayed quiet, he'd lose something far more permanent, himself. The insult at the dinner wasn't just humiliating. It was a warning flare, illuminating a truth he could no longer pretend not to see. The question wasn't whether things could go back to normal. It was whether normal had ever been healthy at all. After the dinner, Lauren treats the moment like a minor inconvenience rather than a wound. In the car, she laughs it off, rolling her eyes as if Ethan's silence is more embarrassing than her words. "You're too sensitive," she says, her tone light but final. Everyone knows it was a joke. The dismissal lands harder than the insult itself. Ethan doesn't argue, not because he agrees, but because he recognizes the pattern. Any discomfort he expresses is reframed as weakness. Any boundary becomes an overreaction. Ryan, on the other hand, avoids him entirely in the days that follow. He doesn't call, doesn't text. When they cross paths, Ryan's usual confidence falters, replaced by quick glances and forced smiles. Guilt hangs around him like a shadow. That avoidance confirms what Lauren's words try to erase. Something crossed a line that night, and everyone felt it, even if no one wants to name it. Once the doubt settles in, Ethan can't unsee what follows. Lauren's phone lights up late at night, always angled away from him. When he asks who she's texting, she answers too quickly, "Just Ryan," as if that should mean nothing. Inside jokes start surfacing at family gatherings, exchanges of glances and smiles that shut Ethan out without explanation. Ryan laughs a little too easily around her, his old confidence resurfacing in her presence. Ethan notices the way Lauren responds to dominance, the way her posture shifts when Ryan speaks, how she listens differently, attentively, eagerly. These aren't isolated moments, they're patterns stitching themselves together. Ethan realizes he's been the constant, not the priority. He isn't threatened by attraction. That would be human. What chills him is the absence of respect. He begins to understand that love, in Lauren's world, is reserved for men she admires, not men who simply show up and stay. The final blow comes by accident, not confrontation. Ethan pauses outside a doorway, hearing his name before he realizes he's listening. Lauren's voice drifts out, casual and unguarded, followed by her friend's laughter. "I mean, if I wanted safe, I'd marry Ethan," she says, as if discussing furniture or weather. Then, softer but sharper, "But Ryan? He's a man." The words settle in Ethan's chest like something final. There's no ambiguity left to hide behind. This isn't about a careless joke or a single comment. It's about hierarchy, respect, power. Ethan understands now that what Lauren values isn't love or loyalty. It's dominance, admiration, the feeling of being claimed by someone she considers superior. The realization doesn't shatter him loudly. It hardens him. The life he thought he was building collapses quietly in that hallway, replaced by clarity he can no longer ignore. Pretending ends here. Ethan chooses privacy over spectacle when he confronts Ryan, meeting him in the garage late one evening, where old trophies still line the shelves like reminders of who the family always celebrated. He doesn't accuse. He asks. Ryan's response is immediate and defensive, a practiced shrug paired with denial. "Nothing happened," he insists, voice casual but eyes restless. He laughs it off, calling Lauren someone who likes attention, as if that explains everything and excuses it at once. Ryan frames himself as a bystander, a victim of Ethan's overthinking, leaning on the same charm that's always smoothed things over for him. Ethan listens carefully, noticing how Ryan avoids specifics, how responsibility never quite lands anywhere. This isn't a confession or an apology, it's an evasion. Walking away, Ethan feels the familiar imbalance settle in again. Ryan hasn't changed. He's just never had to. And that realization hurts more than anger ever could. Lauren responds to Ethan's concerns not with reassurance, but with reversal. She sighs heavily, accusing him of reading into things, of letting insecurity poison their relationship. Her tone is wounded, almost offended, as she frames herself as the one being unfairly judged. "I can't even talk without you assuming the worst," she says, turning his hurt into an accusation. Ethan watches as the conversation pivots away from his pain and toward her discomfort, leaving him apologizing for emotions he didn't choose. Meanwhile, family members close ranks around the wedding plans. His parents urge him to be mature, to avoid drama, reminding him how much is already invested. Dates are set. Payments made. Expectations spoken aloud. The message is clear. Endure quietly. Ethan begins to withdraw, not in defeat, but in defense. He speaks less, reacts slower, letting the noise swirl without pulling him under. In the silence, something inside him begins to sharpen. As weeks pass, Ethan becomes an observer in his own life. He notices how easily his feelings are dismissed, how often respect is treated as optional when love is assumed. The quiet gives him space to think, to separate what he feels from what he's been taught to tolerate. He understands now that love without dignity isn't patience, it's self-erasure. Every compromise he made in the name of harmony slowly rewrites him into someone smaller, someone easier to overlook. That realization lands not as despair, but as resolve. He doesn't need shouting or revenge. He needs alignment with himself. Ethan sees the truth with unsettling clarity. Staying silent isn't protecting the relationship, it's betraying himself. And once that line is crossed, love becomes a performance, not a bond. The pressure doesn't crush him, it refines him. By the time he looks at Lauren again, he's no longer asking whether she respects him. He's asking whether he respects himself enough to walk away. The rehearsal dinner is elegant, almost celebratory, the kind of night meant to smooth nerves and reinforce certainty. Candles glow, glasses rise, laughter floats easily across the table. Lauren is radiant, comfortable, in control. When she makes the joke, it's quieter than before, refined enough to pass as wit. A remark about Ethan being reliable, said with a smile that invites laughter without demanding it. A few people chuckle. Ethan doesn't. He lifts his gaze slowly, not startled, not wounded, prepared. The room senses the shift before it understands it. He interrupts her gently, voice steady, polite even, asking for a moment. The clinking stops. Chairs still. Lauren's smile lingers, confident he'll retreat like always. But Ethan stands, not to argue, not to defend himself, but to speak clearly. In that pause, everyone feels it. This isn't discomfort anymore. This is a reckoning. Ethan doesn't accuse, he explains. Calmly. Methodically. He speaks of the comparisons framed as jokes, the admiration disguised as harmless banter, the emotional intimacy that crossed boundaries long before it crossed lines. He names the disrespect without venom, letting facts do the damage. There is no shouting, no cruelty. Just clarity. Faces around the table tighten as recognition spreads. This isn't insecurity, it's evidence. Ryan stiffens, color draining from his face as his silence betrays him. Lauren tries to interrupt once, then stops. The room no longer belongs to her. Ethan's voice never wavers as he reaches the center of it all, delivering the truth she never expected spoken aloud. You didn't humiliate me because I was small, he says evenly. You did it because you needed someone to feel bigger than. The words land clean and final. No insult could have cut deeper. The truth stands on its own. Lauren breaks, not loudly, but visibly. The confidence drains from her face, replaced by something raw and unguarded. Her mouth opens, searching for control, for a narrative that no longer listens. The smirk is gone. The mask has slipped in front of everyone who mattered. Ethan doesn't wait for a response. He doesn't need closure spoken aloud. He reaches into his pocket and places the ring gently on the table, the sound soft but unmistakable. That sound echoes louder than any argument ever could. He thanks everyone for coming, voice composed, respectful. Then he walks away.
No dramatic pause. No backward glance.
Chairs scrape. Whispers start, but they trail behind him, powerless. The engagement ends not with chaos, but with dignity reclaimed. As the door closes behind Ethan, the room is left holding the weight of a truth revealed too late. For the first time in his life, Ethan chooses himself, and that choice is irreversible. The days after the rehearsal dinner arrive without drama, but heavy with consequence. Family members call in fragments, confusion, concern, disappointment layered together. No one knows quite what to say now that the story has ended differently than planned. Ryan reaches out eventually, voice subdued, offering an apology that sounds practiced and late. Ethan listens, thanks him, and ends the call. There is no relief in hearing it now. He moves into a small, sparsely furnished apartment on the edge of the city, the kind of place that echoes when you walk through it. The silence is unfamiliar at first, almost unsettling. But beneath the emptiness, there's something else, peace. No tension waiting in the next room. No careful calibrations of his words. Ethan sits on the floor the first night, back against the wall, and realizes that for the first time in years, his thoughts don't need permission to exist. Therapy isn't dramatic. It doesn't fix anything overnight. It's slow, uncomfortable, and honest. Ethan learns how often he mistook endurance for love and silence for strength. He begins to understand that masculinity was never about dominance or comparison. It was about alignment, self-respect, and choice. Session by session, he names the patterns he once avoided: people-pleasing, fear of conflict, the belief that being chosen required shrinking himself. Outside the office, he builds rituals that belong only to him: morning walks, cooking simple meals, leaving his phone untouched for hours. The work is quiet, but it's transformative. Ethan starts responding instead of reacting, setting boundaries without apology. He no longer scans rooms for approval. He listens to himself first. The man he's becoming doesn't need to prove anything. He's learning that worth isn't something granted by others. It's something practiced, daily, in the choices no one applauds. Months later, Ethan's life looks simpler, but stronger. He pours energy into his work, not as escape, but as expression. His career begins to grow in ways that feel earned rather than chased. He chooses relationships carefully now, drawn to people who listen as much as they speak. The old urge to compete fades, replaced by something steadier: contentment. Ethan understands that comparison was never the problem. It was the metric he used to measure himself. That metric no longer applies. He doesn't need to be louder, bigger, or more impressive. He just needs to be whole. Standing in his apartment one evening, city lights stretching beyond the window, Ethan smiles, not because he's won anything, but because he's free. Free from shrinking. Free from performance. Free from needing to be seen as enough. He already is. And for the first time, that truth feels permanent. Months pass, not marked by milestones but by ease. Ethan sits alone at a small cafe on a weekday morning, sunlight resting gently on the table between his hands. There's no urgency in him anymore, no tightness in his chest. He sips his coffee slowly, watching the street outside move at its own pace. This version of solitude doesn't feel like absence. It feels intentional. He isn't waiting for anyone to arrive or worried about who might leave. His posture is relaxed, his thoughts unguarded. The man who once measured himself by how well he endured is gone. In his place is someone grounded, present, unperformative. The cafe hums softly around him, but nothing intrudes. Ethan realizes peace isn't loud or triumphant. It's quiet and steady. It doesn't announce itself. It simply stays. And for the first time in his adult life, staying feels natural. The bell above the cafe door rings softly, and Ethan looks up without anticipation. Lauren passes by outside, visible through the glass for only a moment. She slows instinctively, then keeps walking, eyes fixed forward, avoiding the reflection that might catch his. There's no surge of emotion in him, no anger, no longing, not even satisfaction. Just clarity. He sees her now as part of a chapter, not a verdict on his worth. Watching her disappear into the crowd, Ethan understands something that once eluded him. Love should never require self-diminishment. Affection that relies on imbalance isn't love. It's control wearing charm. Respect, he knows now, isn't earned through patience or sacrifice. It's foundational or it's nothing. Lauren's absence doesn't feel like loss. It feels like alignment. The man she needed him to be no longer exists, and the man he became doesn't need her to validate it. Ethan finishes his coffee and sits for a moment longer, not out of hesitation, but appreciation. He thinks about how close he came to staying quiet forever, mistaking tolerance for love. How easy it would have been to keep shrinking just to be chosen. He stands, feeling the solidness of himself in the simple act, and knows he didn't lose a relationship. He outgrew a compromise. Some endings don't come with closure conversations or apologies. They come with understanding. As he steps back into the world, Ethan carries one truth with him, clean and unburdened, a sentence that finally fits without defense or bitterness. She didn't leave because I was lacking, she left because I stopped accepting less. The words don't sound triumphant. They sound settled. And that's the power of them. The story doesn't end with revenge or reconciliation. It ends with self-respect. And that is enough.